Welcome to Between Sundays. I'm Tyler, and it turns out parables about money aren't actually about money at all. Today we're talking about what we're doing with the things God's entrusted us. But before the master comes back from his trip, now that they've dug up their talents out of the ground, let's throw these useless servants into outer darkness and welcome in our favorite co-host, Meredith Berry. Good day, guys.
Good day. There will be gnashing of teeth.
Yeah.
Gnashing of teeth.
I didn't want to get that dramatic, but that is part of it.
It is. What's up?
Yeah, what's up, guys? How's it going?
Good.
Great.
Yeah.
You?
All right. What's new? What's going on in your lives?
I could tell you
Yeah.
that I don't know how much I've talked about this recently, but I know I've probably mentioned it at some point. I'm in kind of like a whole new era. Ever since I went to Turkey and went to Ephesus, the last like year and a half has been a wild journey of academic study for me of like the ancient world and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I just keep leveling it up to like new levels of nerdiness. And so the latest thing is I finally realized, all right, enough is enough. It's time to learn biblical Greek and actually like learn it and get really good at it. I took a Greek grammar class in college. I took a Greek digital tools class in seminary. So like I know my way around the basic, some of the basic vocab and all that, but it's like, all right, we're learning the endings of the nouns and the verbs, and we're doing the declensions and the parsings and all that stuff. It's happening.
You don't think I'm impressive?
I will be at the end of this process. So I'm like all in. It's
How?
using.
So is
How are
this
you doing this?
Duolingo? How
Yeah,
are you
right.
No. So there's this guy, Bill Mounts, and it's kind of like his life journey to like teach people Greek. And so he's got all these resources. And so I bought a very expensive Greek grammar book. It's really thick, really detailed, and a workbook that goes along with it. So I did that. But then I also, my brother-in-law, who is in med school, he introduced me to this app called Anki, which is an open sourced flashcard app that uses this basic concept of learning where it's spaced repetition. So you repeat learning something more as you're first learning it, but then as it becomes more comfortable, it comes up later. So basically you'll get a Greek word, let's say doulos, slave, and you're like, you hit the button, it's slave, and then you get 4 options. Do you want to do it again because you got it wrong? Was it hard? Was it easy? Was it super easy or something like that?
He partied hard.
And depending on this is what I do for fun on my days off. And then whatever you click, it will space it out. So if it was easy, then it'll bring that card back 14 days from now.
Okay.
But if it was hard, you'll get it tomorrow.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so like it is working. Like for Greek words, it's working. I started putting in all these dates that I want to remember. Like ask me when Mount Vesuvius erupted, 79 AD. I know that now because I'm using Anki. So
Thank goodness.
I'm not going to. I could probably recite the emperors and their dates that they reigned, starting with Augustus all the way through the year of the 5 emperors in 193.
Give us like two emperors. What is this, a sentence? Are you speaking a sentence in Greek?
No, this isn't in Greek. Sorry, this is another thing that I'm memorizing.
Okay.
It's like the list of
Just
Roman
facts,
emperors.
a list of facts.
Yeah, what's 79 AD
Okay.
in Greek?
That's I don't know that yet.
What is the name of this thing with the free flashcards?
Anki, Anki. You're gonna want it when you go to seminary.
Cool stuff.
It's actually working really well. So
what is the difference between the book you bought, having that book, and having the Accordance Bible software?
the software is awesome because you could look up all the different words. The book is actually like, all right, chapter 5, nouns. Here's what you need to know about Greek nouns.
Okay.
Here's how they end. Here's how masculine nouns end, feminine nouns end. If it's the accusative case, it's this ending. If it's the nominative case, it's this ending. Nominative is when it's that kind of thing. So it's like grammar.
It's a super fun read.
It's very intense and difficult.
Take it to the beach.
But I'm like, I've got like a rhythm that will have me through the book and conversant in, like, I think it's going to be 60% of all Greek words that show up in the Bible.
Wow.
By the summer. Just
Wait, why
self-learning.
are you doing this?
Okay, 2 reasons. One, it's going to be great for my own biblical studies. Like, it's so much better to read in the original language, and I'll be able to do that, which is awesome. But second, it is the same language, Koine Greek, that was used all throughout the ancient world in the 1st century AD. And so a lot of the original documents, a lot of the things that the early church fathers wrote, a lot of inscriptions on buildings and plaques and stuff like that are in Koine Greek. And so I will now be able to read it as a part of my like academic stuff with the ancient archaeology. So also, I just treated myself today. I have, we'll talk about my stuff fund as one of my tips
Yeah.
later on today, but I have a little bit of money that I set aside and the rule is I can use it for whatever I want. Well, I'll explain it later.
Don't act like you're a big shot.
It's just a little bit of money, but I had a little bit of money and I just learned through a YouTube channel that I watched that there are some legit sites that sell actual Roman coins. They just haven't been cleaned yet. So you can buy coins that could be from the 1st century, the 4th century. And so I went ahead and bought some like 5 slightly higher quality Roman era coins from Israel. And so
Whoa.
I have no idea what they'll be or when they'll be from, but I'm going to have actual artifacts that I can like clean, look at, hold, cherish, show people. It's going to be,
Man, you had a big week.
Wow.
this is like the last few months. It's just been getting deeper and deeper into all of this. I have been using the interlibrary loan system because there are all these academic books that like I can't get my hands on, and Amazon sells them for like $490, but you can get them interlibrary loan from the Valparaiso Public Library for free. They just do that for you. And then
Wow.
they show up at the Hamilton
you
East Public Library.
Have an addictive personality. Like,
Yes,
are you
always.
addicted to this? Like, this is like,
I obsess over the
Obsessive,
things that
yeah.
I get into. However, this something seems different with this one because it's like it's enduring. It's like a year and a half that's only gotten more and more intense. And I'm doing this in
and
my,
it's just, the end result is you're going to know more stuff.
yeah. What I'm really pursuing and the reason why this like matters to like my faith and calling and job is I'm pursuing, I want to understand the reality that the 1st century church faced, the realities of like the church trying to survive in a world where the Roman Empire was all powerful, where you were expected to worship the emperor and all this stuff. And we kind of have like the New Testament, and then there are a couple of little written sources that come over the next few hundred years. But being able to get into the archaeology and all of that, the inscriptions and the coins and all that, that ends up filling out the knowledge of the reality of their world in ways that the written stuff can't do and doesn't do because there's so few things written. There's a lot more coins than there are written texts from that time, right? Because coins, silver stuff that lasts,
Yeah.
bronze lasts, but not paper. So anyway, it's all helping me understand what the church was up against and what the church faced in the early church, which in a roundabout way then helps me understand how to make sense of our world and what the church is facing now. So this is why I consider it my free time and my hobby, because this does not, you're going to hear like one little aside comment in one sermon that's going to come from like hours of research, and it's not,
It's going to help though.
it'll help me.
No,
But it'll help.
You gave a fun fact even this week in your message about what a talent was.
Right.
And I don't think I'd heard it that way. I always pictured the little satchel,
Yeah, the little coin
purse.
pouch. Yeah, yeah,
always
yeah.
pictured that.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. You shed more light on things and you really help us understand the world behind the text when you geek out on stuff like that. I do want us to do a show and tell pod when the coins come in.
Okay. Once I got to do a little research, because the thing is no one's going to be telling me what these are. I'll have to actually do the research, look at the inscriptions on the coin, figure out whose face is that, work through it. There's a whole research
Whoa.
process behind it.
So you're going to have to like clean.
I may. Yeah. Some, depending on the state that they're in.
Wow.
There are some
right.
that get dug up from dirt, some that get dug up from sand.
Okay.
And if they come up from sand, they don't need as much cleaning.
Well, I've been learning a lot about how to refinish cast iron. And so I
It's
wonder if
probably
like
almost
the
identical.
electrolysis process
I don't know.
of getting off like years of earth and crust, if
What
that
about
will
millennia of crust? I don't know. We'll
dip
find
it in
out.
some lye.
Anyway, what are you guys up to?
Speaking of all that, I just got a board game called Foundations of Rome. So if you need
Ooh.
to know anything about Roman architecture,
Is it so? Like, is
I
it
can help
actual Roman architecture?
Yeah, it's
I
like
feel
the-
like I want to come over
it's
for
like
a game
the-
night.
Grand Insula and the Domus Maxima.
Okay.
You've played this game?
I haven't played it yet. I just got
Was
it.
this that game that we were talking about last 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
This is the big one.
Got a
The
pottery
one you bought.
studio, the luxury gardens,
Wow.
the majestic fountains. Yeah, anything. If you want to learn about the foundations of Rome architecture, I can.
All right.
I can make some Roman dishes and bring them over for game night and then watch you guys play.
Colosseum, Temple of Vulcan, Temple of Minerva.
This
Oh,
sounds
hey.
Anything
like
you'd
a
ever
blast.
imagine,
Yeah.
we can build it in board game style.
I can't wait. All right. I'm in. I'm in. Anyway,
Marin, what's new with you?
Not much. I feel like life is kind of settling into a nice little fall rhythm now that my nieces are back with my sisters in North Carolina. Kind of spent the weekend cleaning out my refrigerator, getting my house back in order.
Mm-hmm. Got some conviction, get rid of some of that food
I've been
in your
doing
house.
so much better at eating every leftover.
Really?
Yeah, for real. Like we're trying hard. We're putting actual effort into that to save money and to just be better stewards.
And to show your niece that,
Oh my
that you
goodness,
actually
I'll
do eat all this
show
food.
her.
Yeah.
So you're doing better at leftovers, like the food that you make, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and like making sure that, we bring it for lunch the next day or whatever it is.
Because when you cook,
you
you cook for like 30 people.
I really
so you have
do.
leftovers for multiple
it's
weeks.
so bad. It's bad, and I don't know how to not cook that much.
How is that leftover pork I gave you though?
It was delicious. The one cold bite of it that I took before I left it in somebody's refrigerator on accident, it was great, and I thank you for your
Weren't you up
offering.
at like 4 a.m. working on that?
I was up all night slaving away at this smoked pulled pork, and Marin said, "You have to bring it to me, please and thank you." So I brought it, and she left it
Promptly forgot it.
at the off day or offsite retreat.
Yeah. Sorry. You guys are going to come home. You're going to find a Rubbermaid of pork in your fridge.
Yep.
And I'm sorry about that. I've been sharpening my sourdough game. That's
All right.
probably my
Ooh.
biggest thing.
What was lacking? What do you need?
I'm just trying different things. Like, so I only bake on the weekends, and it's part of my sabbatical rhythm. It's been awesome. I'll feed the starter on Friday, so that Saturday is the day of like, we're stretching, we're folding, we're spending hours just shaping this dough,
Yeah.
I
hanging
gotta tell you,
out.
our Gen Z demo is just like
They love
skyrocketing
this right now.
when they hear us talking about
my
this.
Gen Z kids like eating the bread when I'm done with it.
Yeah.
But I'll make like a garlic rosemary version. Then I'll make a plain version. This weekend, I tried for the very first time a cinnamon raisin sourdough bread, and it's
Was it good?
the best I've ever made. It's
that sounds delicious.
stunning.
Did you bring some?
No, but
She left it in that fridge
I
up
thought
at
about it.
Ah, man, I see where we
I
stand.
can bring you guys some tomorrow, but
right.
it is by far the best loaf of bread I've ever made. And I just was shouting when she came out of the oven and was so beautiful.
You fed the mother,
Shouting.
and then, or is that only for yogurt?
Yeah, that's for the apple cider vinegar.
You have to like wait a really long time for it
Yeah.
to cool down because you don't want to cut into it when it's hot for various reasons. But when I finally cut into this thing, it's like a mosaic. It's a beautiful, delicious work of art. And
Yeah.
I'm so excited. As excited as you get about Roman imperial cults,
Wonderful.
I get about
it.
bread.
I get it. This is what it's like to have passions and hobbies.
This is exactly
This is
what it's
at
like.
its best.
Yep.
What do you get excited about, Tyler?
Well, I wasn't excited about it, but on sometime last week, I pulled up to my house and I realized there was a lot of paint chipping. Like,
Yeah.
I look up, we don't have a second story, but it's up like above the garage. And I'm like, oh man, someone should take care of that. And I realized like, I don't know. I don't like stuff like this. But the first time, the first time I paint the outside of my house will be the first time I ever paint an outside of anyone's house. So like, anytime I do something for my house, it's like the first time I'm doing it. So I'm like, man, I guess I got to paint that. And so that's what I did yesterday. I thought, I'm going to paint the outside of my house. It's going to take a couple hours and I'll watch football and
Couple hours.
no, in order to paint the part that I painted, I had to get on the roof.
Yeah.
And so
To like scrape down below.
Yeah.
I just scrape. No, the part is like up above the garage roof. So I'm like
I see.
sitting on the roof, scraping the wood. But I don't know if you guys have ever painted while sitting on a roof, but like your bucket of paint or your paint thing that's holding all the paint is like
At an angle.
that.
Yes.
And so
Did it slide off the roof?
a couple of times it was like not steady. And if you look at my roof now, there's like paint on it.
You didn't put a drop cloth down?
I did, but
Maybe you don't want to put a drop cloth on a roof because maybe like the cloth would slip and then you would slip.
that definitely happened.
Okay.
So I was standing on the roof on the drop cloth, sliding a couple of times. But and then I put the paint can up on the chimney because I'm on the roof. So I put it on the chimney because I'm like, the chimney's flat.
It's going to fall in
But
the
Lauren
chimney.
had the fire going.
Oh no.
So everything was hot after that. So once I got all situated, it was fine for the most
Is
part.
this something where you could have just used a taller ladder Did you need to be sitting on the roof?
Yeah, because like the middle of that part, you couldn't reach it with it. You had to get on the roof to paint it. So I did it and it was fine. But like, I don't enjoy it.
That doesn't sound like anyone would enjoy it. That.
And
that
then,
sounds terrible.
So
tell me again.
Somebody
about
listening
that
to this
Gen Z
right now is
demographic.
like, yeah, you should have just done it this way. But here's the way I did it. I painted it and then I'm like, all right, there's a bunch of paint chips that weren't on the drop cloth. So I'm going to go get my leaf blower. I'm going to blow those off the roof.
Yeah.
Smash
classic.
cut to me blowing them onto the wet paint. So I basically had to redo everything because I
pick
blew
all
a
the
bunch of
pieces
dirt
up.
and paint chips onto the wet paint. And there's paint on my shingles. So
Wow.
But here's the way that this
the
works.
good news is I've done it now.
When you do it again in 15 years, you'll know what not to do.
Yeah.
That's experience. That's wisdom.
And I realized, so my house is, I don't know, 70 years old. It's very old. And nobody has ever scraped the paint off before. That's what I've realized. That's what I
They were just
came up
painting
against.
over.
They just paint over it.
Thick chips.
Yeah, thick chips and very, very hard to scrape. But that's what I was doing yesterday on the roof.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm a real boy now.
What is it? A grown-up boy?
Yeah, I'm a grown-up boy.
2 midlife crises and 1 real man.
You're a grown-up boy.
Yeah.
This is us in our 40s.
Also, I did watch the Bears game. And
Oh, well,
I
we
don't
don't
know.
need to talk about that.
there was a Hail Mary pass that lost the game for the Bears.
For the
Is
Bears.
that one of the most dramatic? Like, I never talk sports, but even I was like, oh my goodness, that has to be so rare.
I almost texted Jed during this because about 5 minutes prior to that amazing pass, the Bears made one of the dumbest calls ever
In
Like,
NFL history.
they designed a play to hand off to the lineman.
Okay. Okay, but we were still up and we were about to
No, they were
win.
losing.
Within 2 seconds, we
Yeah,
lost the game.
They were losing, and they're like, let's hand off to the lineman. So they hand off to the lineman who never touches a football, and he fumbled it, of course. And the Commanders got the fumble, and then 5 minutes later, they throw a Hail Mary, and they
win
caught
the
it.
whole game. I was on an elliptical machine at the gym and I gasped out loud.
Yeah.
I could not believe my eyes.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen anything that dramatic in sports history.
Yeah, we can cut out all the Bears talk.
That's what the people come here for.
Yeah.
Obviously, I had a lot to share at that part of our conversation.
Yeah.
Barry, I think if you would have seen this play,
I would have loved it.
Totally get it.
I'm all about sports that happen to be on in front of me.
Yeah, it was like a
Astonishingly
70-yard
horrible.
pass, and usually 90% of these get knocked down, knocked to the ground.
Yeah.
And this one, they caught it.
Mary full of grace.
Bears lost. Yeah. All right. So enough of that. Bears talk, sports talk. We're in week 4. We just wrapped up the final week of
It's
our
over.
Making Change
You guys
series.
can come back to church now.
Yeah, pretty much. People who don't want to hear about money come back to church. So
They probably don't need to, right? They're probably doing great. They're probably thriving in their finances. So they took the month off, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
I guess. So I want to treat this week a little bit different than how we normally handle the podcast after a sermon. Normally we dig deep into the sermon. We spend the next 45 minutes or so just talking about that specific sermon. I want to do a bit of that, but really I want to take time to pretty much practically talk about like the month.
Yeah.
And then Barry's brought his tips.
Nuggets.
He's got
Let's go.
I keep calling them tips, and Barry keeps insisting on calling them nuggets.
Little wisdom nugs.
Yeah, wisdom nugs from the sermons that we've heard this month. So before we do any of that, for this week, Barry, what was the big idea of the sermon that you shared with us this past week?
Yeah, well, we kind of ended where we began with this concept of stewardship. We looked at the parable of the talents, which we can talk about specifically if we want to get into it a little bit. But put simply, I brought us back to the idea of, okay, God owns it all, which includes our resources, but also all the other gifts that he gives us, the passions, the skills, the gifts, the spiritual gifts, everything that he gives us. He invests it in us, entrusts it to us. And it's our responsibility to use those things to do what God desires, what God wants to see in our world, bring healing, bring life, and in our money, with our money to, act with biblical financial wisdom. And so that's kind of the overall big idea of that parable. But then I brought it back to the concept of wisdom, which is the last sort of key idea from this series. And I basically pointed out that in the story, we get a glimpse of what wisdom looks like. The third servant in the story does not demonstrate wisdom because he does not do with his money what the master would have wanted him to do. And then the other two do demonstrate wisdom because they do what the master wanted them to do with their money. And so I kind of talked about that just to look at what does that look like in our lives to know what the master wants us to do with our money, to not try to do this on our own, but to listen to the wisdom of others. And finally, to just recognize the fact that God takes care of his stewards, that abundance follows faithfulness. So when we're faithful with the things that he's entrusted to us, blessing is the result. So put simply, we must have biblical wisdom, financial wisdom, if we want to know what to do with our money in a way that would please God, since it's his.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway from this sermon was that a talent is the size of a salt bag, right?
2.
Salts, like for a salt
Like a-
softener.
Like a water softener.
Water softener.
Yeah.
The weight
And
of them.
I'm
2.
thinking about how much I hate carrying those things around, and that's my biggest takeaway is that I would have hated.
No, man, you would have had a couple of donkeys. Yeah, you would have
Is
loaded them
donkey
up.
the plural of donkey?
I don't know.
Like
You wouldn't have been carrying them
couple of
around. You would have
donkey.
had donkeys.
you would have had donkeys and barrels.
Hooves.
I am excited to get to your nuggets or tips or whatever it is we're calling them, but I wish we could camp out longer on the message itself. I was really looking forward to your take on the parable of the talents. I think I said it a couple weeks ago. I felt like I've always identified with the third servant. And I've wondered,
The unwise one.
That's me. Hi.
Or the fearful
To
one.
be clear,
That's right.
the fearful, unwise
The
one.
unwise one who was cast into outer darkness where there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. That is
You've always
me, you
identified with
guys.
that
That's
one?
totally me.
All right.
No, I've always wondered, like, well, what did he do so wrong? What's wrong with being afraid?
Yeah.
He didn't lose any of the master's money.
Right.
He gave him back every dime he was given. But you pointed out the issue is that the man lacked wisdom. He thought he knew what the master wanted. He was kind of presumptive about it, like, oh, he's just going to want it back as it came, or dollar for dollar. He was presumptive. He thought he knew what the master wanted, but he clearly did not. He lacked wisdom. If he would have asked the other two, he could have gotten some wisdom.
I think so.
Absolutely. And that's what you kept saying, that we should be learning from the wisdom of others.
Right.
And
Yeah. Well, and I also I also said, and I kind of think that in the end, this third servant was not really thinking about the master's desires at all. He was thinking about his own skin. He was afraid. He was afraid. He didn't want to get in trouble. And so that's why he buried it. He wasn't thinking like, I bet my master wants to make sure to get all his money back. I don't know. Maybe he was thinking that, but regardless, like the other two, they had a much better idea of what was going to make the master happy.
Yeah. He says something in his plea or his explanation when the master comes back. Oh, I know that
you're a hard man.
Yeah. Yeah. And so maybe that was the fear of, oh, I know he's a hard man. And so he's going to want, if I lose one penny, he will punish me.
Right.
Yeah. He lacked
So your
wisdom.
question is, what's wrong with fear?
I don't think it is a parable about fear anymore. After the way that Barry described it, I think it's a parable about lacking wisdom. And maybe even a parable about the fallacy of self-sufficiency. Like he thought his idea was the right idea.
Right.
If he would have just talked to servant 1 and servant 2, he might have gotten more wisdom. He might have grown in his wisdom, and he might have invested that money in a way that was wiser, that resulted in a return on investment, and then he wouldn't have been cast into outer darkness.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess, how did you used to look at it? Like it was like, you really wondered what was wrong with fear.
No, when I've read that in the past, I've always wondered, like, man, what did he do so wrong? Like you got all your money back. Why was he wicked?
Yeah.
You know?
I guess I guess I was, as I was processing this, I was like, well, the thing that's wrong with fear, because it's like, are you living out of faithfulness or are you living out of fear? And I guess nothing's wrong with living out of fear. It's just like you don't realize what could be if you choose to not live out of fear.
Yeah. And we don't know about the investments that servant 1 and servant 2 made. Were they risky?
Right.
I mean, obviously they doubled their investment or more so. So I don't know what kind of risk was involved.
Right.
It seems like they knew what they were doing.
Right.
They knew that they were going to please the master or even impress the master with what they were able to do with what they were given.
Right. Yeah, and that it's important, I think, to pay attention to the line that says that he gave them to each according to their abilities. So there was a sense in which I'm going to entrust more of my money to the servant that is likely going to be the most successful. You know, that's why he's going to get 5 and the next guy's going to get 2. So it's arguable. You could say like, well, then what did he see in that third servant? Maybe he didn't have much faith in him, but he did give him, 75 pounds of silver. So he had some level of trust in him.
Yeah.
But then that third servant, like, did not have the ability, did not whatever. The one thing I just want to say about this parable, I think it's important with Jesus's parables. Yes, in a way, this is kind of a metaphor or an allegory for our lives, but also like, let's not just assume that this master is like a 1-to-1 correspondence with God. Like, God is not necessarily the same as a master that reaps where he didn't sow. And, it's like,
He's not taking a trip.
He's not gone. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that is a tendency. We tend to look at and we think like, or the other parable from week 1 of the master that praises the servant for forgiving all the debt of the people that owed his master money. Like that's a weird thing that people have a trouble with, because he's like, wait, so God endorses immorality? And it's like, well, that's not the point of the story. So all I'm saying is, let's not just 1-to-1, equate God to this master, even though what Jesus is describing does speak to the relationship that we have with God and God's resources.
So for the whole 4 weeks of this series, like what do we want people to, if you could crystallize it, what do you want people to do? Like, how do you want them to, if someone were to pick up a year from now and say, hey, you got to listen to this Making Change series. Like, what do you hope people overall take away from this? Yeah.
I mean, I think it boils down, I said it in this message, but I think what it boils down to is I want people to just be intentional in the posture that they have with their money. The stuff below the waterline, to use the iceberg metaphor. It's like, most of the time, all we think about with our money is what we're spending on, what we're giving, what we're saving. Like, but we really need to think about the matters of the heart and ask ourselves, like, how do we see this money? And that involves all the things we talked about: faith, contentment, stewardship, all of those things. It's just a much bigger question than just like, how much money do I have? It's what am I doing with the money that I have? What am I doing with the resources that God has given me? So this is what's difficult. And I'm glad we're going to get practical during this, because the sermon series was not practical. Like, I'll just say that. Yeah. It wasn't designed to be. It was about our posture. It was about our heart. It was about like, how are we handling the things that we have? Practicality comes after.
Yeah. So before we dig into some of the practical things, there's one thing that Grace is offering that is practical, and that is these financial health workshops. And so we've already had one. If you heard the message this past weekend, or you're still like, man, I know we missed the first one. There's still time. By the time this podcast comes out, there's still a couple days to sign up for the second one, which is November 2nd, Saturday. You can go to gracechurch.us/makingchange and you can sign up for that. But from what I've understood from Dave Rodriguez and his team, it's very helpful for those who participate in it. So make sure you sign up for that Saturday morning, November 2nd. All right. So Barry mentioned in his sermon that he has some nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah.
That he's picked up throughout his life. And so Barry, how do you want to go through these? Because I don't know about Marin, but I'm just kind of ready to take notes.
Some of these are not going to blow your mind, and some of them might be interesting. Maybe I'll just talk about it and then we can.
Yeah. I'm really interested to hear your nuggets of wisdom.
And I also want to be clear. This is not some like systematic, here's your 10-step plan to have great. These are just some of them are really, really minor, but they're just things that I've picked up.
You referenced your parents. Is a lot of this from your parents? Is all of this
some
from
of
your
the
parents?
some of the first ones absolutely are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a combination of things I've learned from others, things I've picked up either through my own experience or lack thereof, or what, like making mistakes or learning things the hard way, or even just like little things that I've learned from YouTube or elsewhere that I'm like, okay, that's good. I need to pay attention to that. So,
All right.
there's
So financial nugget, financial wisdom nugget number one.
Number one. And this one is
a
so
10-piece nugget.
This one
Nugget
is
tip.
so obvious, but I'll explain why it's one that I think is important. Use a budget. There it is. There's your tip. Have a budget. And here's why. It's important, I suppose, to know like how much money do I plan to use on these different things. To me, the most important component of having a budget is when you go through everything that you've spent money on. So every month I go through our budget and look line by line at every single expense. You know, I make sure that I have a very nerdy Excel spreadsheet, as you might imagine. But I compare that to the credit card statement and I look at every single purchase. And here's why that's so important. Because you can start to actually know what you're spending your money on. It's one thing to say like, yeah, we eat out. It's another thing to be like, oh, we spent $450 eating out this month. Cause you don't think that it's that much, but then you go to Jimmy John's and Chipotle and then you have one nice meal with drinks at a restaurant. And like, before you know it, you've spent a ton of money on eating out. And so having a budget is one of the ways that you can actually just have a better sense of where your money's actually going. So that's my reason for saying have a budget.
2 questions about that. One, why do you choose Excel versus like they've got a million budgeting tools? So why do you choose Excel? And follow up, this is not question 2, but follow up, like why do you only look at it once a month?
Actually, I kind of look at it twice a month, try to, but once a month is how often like credit card statements come out. And so it's my main reason to like, okay, I've got to justify or reconcile this month's whatever.
So every time you make a purchase, you go to your Excel spreadsheet and add that manually.
No, once a month I go through and I add all the expenses,
Because you're
and then
looking at your credit
and then
card receipt.
I'll make sure it's accurate on the credit card statement. Or like what I'll do is at the end, sometimes if I'm doing it twice a month, I'll go to the end of the month because credit card statements for me come out on like the 15th or 16th for whatever reason. So at the end of the month, I'll finish up that month based on what I've spent. And then the next month I'll reconcile all the expenses from that month and then add the ones for the next month. I don't know. It makes sense.
So why do you use that instead of like, I don't know, Mint or Rocket Money or other budgeting tools?
Two reasons. I have not found personally that with like my system and my way of understanding money coming in and out, that those systems work as well for me. Cause a lot of them kind of rely on like auto sorting things like, okay, I'll put this in food, I'll put this in, but that's not always the way that I think about the expenses that I make. The other reason is because I've been using the Excel spreadsheet as a budget for like 25 years. So we're getting real nerdy and vulnerable here. I have over the years, anytime I do a minor upgrade to the Excel spreadsheet, like how it works or what functions I'm adding or whatever, I will add another number to the budget. So it'll be like budget 3.2 and then I'll make it 3.3. And if I ever do a major transformer, like I'll add another number, a full on first number to it. So now I'm on budget 5.3.
All right.
Version 5.3. And so
Jed uses Excel. Jed does the budgeting and stuff in our house and he uses Excel. Yeah. And I think it seems like a no-brainer to have a budget, but like you mentioned the referral services program through our care center.
Yeah.
I asked him about that. What do you tell your friends who come to you for help? And that is step 1. It's creating a budget, and there's financial coaches there that can look at your bank statements and help you create a budget.
Yeah.
So and so my second question was, what has most surprised you? You said you spend $100 on Jimmy John's or whatever. What for you specifically, what is the most surprising thing in your spending habits? Because for me, it is always eating out. It's like, wow.
You're right.
Man, we spent a lot of money on eating out. Or we do like
concert tickets.
Concert tickets?
I'm sure that's what it is.
We do like I don't love it, but we do like shopping. Like shopping is a bucket that's kind of like a catch-all for everything. And I'm not sure it's super helpful, but it is always surprising how much money goes into that bucket. So what for you guys is like most surprising
Well, one of the things I've lots of things that I've learned just from doing this process. I mentioned the food thing. Another thing that surprises me is whenever we're doing like a home project, like we're building those cabinets that I was working on and finished those, or we're redoing the floor in there or whatever. Anytime there's like a project, it always, if you actually add up all the expenses, like how many times we've gone to Lowe's and all the different, it ends up always being about twice as much as you thought you were going to spend on the project, just because you don't expect it. And when you're in the middle of the project, in for a penny, in for a pound, I think is the phrase. You're already started. You're not going to stop the project halfway through. So you're going to spend what it takes to get the project done. Anyway, it always costs more. So you have to like really be prepared if you're going to jump into a big,
how it is,
project.
Paint chips. You got to start all over again.
I said I was going to the hardware store for what is it, a paint tray or whatever?
Yeah.
And I came back and I spent $100.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Paint's expensive.
Yeah.
All right, what's tip number 2?
All right, tip number 2. And this one,
nugget number 2.
This one is definitely nugget 2. This is definitely one that I picked up from my parents. This is what they taught me early on, and I think it's really, really important. And I think Ron Blue would say the same thing. I think this is something that comes out in the workshops and stuff. But basically, the tip number 2 is get your budget priorities in the right order. Or put your budget priorities in the right order. Mm-hmm. And here's what I think of as the right order, and I'll explain this in a second. Tithe, taxes, emergency savings and retirement, other giving, and then your like budget expenses that you have to pay, and then your lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's why I say that.
If I did that, I'd be dealing with like $9.
Well, that's part of the thing. So the tithe, because we don't need to get into a whole thing about tithing, but the way I understand biblical tithing is that it is off the top. You are giving straight back to God what he gave to you. A lot of what the Israelites had to do was give first fruits, the very first thing that they harvest from their fields or their vines or whatever, they give straight to God. And there's something about that, which is that reflection of, okay, God owns it all. So I want to remind myself of that with exactly what I receive, I'm giving back to him. And so set an amount, 1%, 10%, 20%, whatever, like wherever you are in your journey, set an amount and give that first to God. Okay. And then pay taxes, which you kind of already do. If you have a normal paycheck, it's already in there. So, but it's still helpful to think, like when you think about how much money you quote unquote have, think about it after tithe and after taxes. That's how much you're actually working with. Right. Because that's, and then you emergency savings and retirement. This is kind of a tip 2B, but it's important. Make sure you've got a good chunk of money saved up. Like usually people say like 3 to 6 months worth of income in your emergency savings.
I start laughing.
Well, I mean, yeah, it takes discipline. You really have to do this.
Yeah.
But once you have that filled, then the money that you're using to fill that up can go elsewhere. But you got to make sure that that's happening. Because when you have your water heater go out or something, unless like it's under warranty, which it usually isn't, you're going to have to pay cash to get a new one because you can't just not have a water heater. I guess you could, but anyway, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So having the emergency savings there saves you from having to go into debt whenever something happens. And then also saving for retirement, that emergency savings and retirement both need to happen before you get to the other stuff. Because if you try to spend all the other money, you're going to end up with nothing left over for those, which are important. Other giving. So this is how I do it, but I have a tithe that goes to Grace. And then I do taxes, emergency savings, retirement, but then my other giving. So I have like some partner ministries, Mission to Ukraine, other organizations, missionaries that I support. That's where that money comes in. I still think of it as before the rest of the budget, but after taxes and all that. And then budget, which is like phone payment, house payment. I guess if you do have a car payment, like all that stuff goes there. And then lifestyle stuff. And that's buying things for fun, eating out, all that stuff that goes beyond just needing. Mm-hmm. And I also would include having like a fund that I save up, which we'll talk more about in a second, but I save up for bigger purchases that I want in the future. That's where that fits. Roman coins. Yeah. That goes somewhere else and I'll explain that as well. But yeah, so the idea being like, that's where your lifestyle is. And the point and the main sort of thing I'm trying to get across here is by putting your priorities in order, what you think of as your lifestyle is ultimately going to be a lot smaller. Like you said, it's just going to be like $9. Yeah. But what that does is it tells you what you actually have to work with. What most people do, unfortunately, is they get their paycheck, they spend most of it on lifestyle, and then they take the leftover to say, oh, and we should probably have some emergency savings. And oh yeah, I've got retirement. Oh, I forgot about taxes. And then there's nothing left for tithe, right? Because you're not giving off the top, you're giving leftovers, and usually there's nothing left. So it's getting it in order so that you get your priorities out there first.
So when you do have the emergency savings and your water heater does go out, and you empty that savings or whatever, do you spend time just trying to get that filled back up as fast as possible? Or is it like, well, we give X amount of dollars every month to the emergency savings. That's what we will do until it is filled back up. Or do you try to like rearrange things? Like, what do you do when things get off balance?
It's the second thing you said. If the emergency, like that's where we are right now, the emergency savings is really low because we had to redo our water purifier system or our water softener. It doesn't matter. Anyway, we had to spend a bunch of money on that. And so now that emergency savings, I'm rebuilding it every month. I'm not like putting all else aside to get that filled, but like I'm setting aside, I don't know, maybe it's $250 goes right back into that every month. And it is kind of a priority, but once it's filled, then that money's free to be used for anything else. So,
and you can go hard, as hard as you want, I suppose. You can say things like, oh, well, let's not go out to dinner this month and let's take that money instead to rebuild that emergency fund.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Right.
I was trying to find in this God Owns It All book, but I'm pretty sure he describes it almost verbatim the way you just described it. Tithing off the top and then the sequence.
Yeah. It's all about getting your priorities in order.
All right. Nugget number 3.
Oh, well, I guess we already talked about this. Number 3, prioritize an emergency savings fund. So there we go. We already covered it. We move on to number 4. Okay. Start saving for retirement as early as possible. And this is what I wish I could go back and tell every high school student, because retirement, the way that it works, like is you guys know what compound interest is? It's that you put money away in your retirement account. Maybe it's stocks, maybe it's a Roth IRA, maybe it's a 401k, whatever. You put your money in a retirement account and you keep doing it consistently. The earlier you start, the more you're going to have at the end by orders of magnitude. Even if you're only able to put in a little bit now, what you're putting in will start to earn interest. And that interest goes right back into the pool of what you're putting in. And so you keep putting stuff in, and an even larger amount gets interest, and then that interest gets added, and then that even larger amount gets interest on that, and then and you just keep adding to it, and it starts to multiply. And so the magic happens after about 30 years of that is it starts to get insane, where like it starts you start doubling what you've put into it and really incredible returns. You have to start it early, and it has to be consistent for that compound interest to really kick in. You can't wait till you're 49 and then start saving for retirement if you're expecting your retirement fund to be able to care for you when you're retired, So start saving early.
So what do you say to somebody who is like, they are 49.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it's too late.
Well,
what do you do? Like,
it's too late to get the biggest benefits out of compound interest, but you still need to start saving for retirement. It probably means you're going to work a lot later than you want to.
Talk to people about how to wisely invest the money you do have. How to make the most out of what you do have. Yeah. Again, learning from the wisdom of others.
Right. One of the things I learned about recently is that there are these target retirement date funds. So you can basically calculate, okay, I'm 23 now. That means I would probably, if I retired at 65, it would be whatever that year is. I'm not doing the math. 2089, right? To retire if you're 23 now.
You're looking at me with a math question?
Math? Come on.
You gotta knock this off.
Yeah, all right, forget it. Whatever. So let's just say you're going to retire in 2089. No, that's not right. I added 60 to 20. It'd be 2069. let's say you're gonna retire in 2069. All right. So you can put your money into a target retirement date of 2069. And what that does is there's like a balance. When you're younger, you can be a little more risky with your investments, bigger returns, a little bit more risk. But the older you get, you don't want to risk. You don't want to get to 64 and have all of your stuff in like Tesla stock. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow at Tesla. You want to make sure it's in things that have a lower risk. But what you do is you start putting into a target retirement date fund, and it will actually automatically adjust the risk as you get closer to your date of retirement.
Cool.
So all you have to do is just put the money into it, and it'll start as a young person, it'll start putting it in more, slightly more risky with a little, your portfolio will be diversified, and then it'll start reducing the risk as you get older, but you'll gain all the benefits of compound interest. So anyway,
I'm in awe of these nuggets of wisdom.
so many. We were only on nugget 3, right? Or is
That was 5. What? No,
That was 4.
Was that
All right,
4?
here we go. Should we keep going, or do you have questions about?
Yeah, let's go.
We
a
gotta
little
go. We
quicker.
gotta. Sorry. All right. This one's simple. We don't need to spend a bunch of time on it. Nugget 5: save up for the bigger things that you want and pay cash for them instead of credit. That probably is obvious, but that's the kind of thing that not only does it prevent you from going into debt, which means that you now have to pay interest to a bank on the thing that you bought. It means that you can actually grow in your appreciation for the thing you're about to have. You can have the anticipation of it, the payoff of knowing that it's just yours, full stop. That's the way to go. So save up if you can for the things that you want to buy.
I have a nugget based on that.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right. So I feel like it's important to spend your money where you spend your time.
Ooh, all right.
Yeah. Like your TV, your bed, your car, like that's where you spend that's when you spend a lot of your time. So don't cut corners on like your bed, your mattress. Get a nice, if you can.
Your nugget is get a nice mattress.
No, it's like spend your money where you spend your time.
No, that's actually similar to my next nugget.
See?
So let's go there.
Okay.
The next nugget, which I don't know what number it is buy once, cry once.
Oh yeah.
Buy once, cry once. So this I started learning from woodworking YouTubers, but I've started to apply it in different parts of my life. The idea being like, if you're gonna get something that you need or want, get like a good one that you're not gonna have to replace again and again and again. So yeah, like I got, when I first started getting into drinking French press coffee, I would get these glass carafes, right? And they kept breaking. And because they were the cheapest ones, you could get them for whatever, $10, and they're like great. And then they'd shatter, and I'd have shards of glass to deal with, and I had to get a new French press thing. And I was spending, every couple of years I'd have to buy a new French press. And then finally I was like, wait, they make stainless steel ones with like the vacuum walls with they're better.
And you probably looked at that at one point and you're like,
they're way
that's
too
25
expensive.
whole bucks. Like it
was like $20 more than the glass one. But I bought it, and I've been using it for 12 years. Like, buy once, cry once. You cry at the amount that you're spending once for something to last. And so if you're going to buy a bed or a mattress, buy once, cry once. Don't get a bed that's going to make you like have bad back problems, and then you have to get a new mattress every 3 years because it keeps wearing out. Get one that's going to last. Cry once so that you'd only have to buy once.
Cast iron.
That's what I'm telling you. But I use that when it comes to like tools, chainsaw, anything like that. I get kitchenware. But if you keep in mind the tip before, and you're saving up and paying cash for these things, it's different. Don't just buy the nicest thing and then go into debt to fund your lifestyle.
Barry said, cry once.
I did.
Cry once.
Yeah.
All right. That's number 6.
All right. Number 7. We're getting there. Number 7. Liv and I call it a stuff fund, but my tip is create a stuff fund. And so the way that it works for us is, because we each have different hobbies and things that we would want to spend our money on. Liv likes clothes, often returns clothes, just like we'll buy things online. I like to save up for Roman coins and random little like tools hiking chairs, that kind of thing. Exactly. So usually mine will be, more expensive, but it'll take months and months to save up for. So what we do in our budget is each of us gets a little bit of money that is just our stuff fund. And that can be, we can use it for whatever we want. No strings attached, no guilt, no shame. It's yours to buy stuff with. And so she has hers. I have mine. Often Liv will use hers up in a month and then she'll return a bunch of stuff and have more money there to use for the other things. Whereas I will probably wait 4 or 5 months and then buy something that costs a couple $100, whatever. So get a stuff fund, and however you want to use it, it gives you the freedom to you can make those impulse purchases. If you've got money in your stuff fund, you can buy the things that you like.
That's something I've been inspired by with the two of you, because I think you both have talked about.
Yeah, we did it for a while.
Stuff
we
fund.
abused it, but it'd be like
You start borrowing from next month.
It's like, man, I really want this thing, board game, whatever, board game, and it costs more than my stuff fund. So I'm just gonna not get anything for the next 5 months.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna get it right now.
Yeah, right.
So
Which works in theory,
right.
but we've definitely done that.
Yeah, it works. All right, the last 3 have to do with giving, and these. Actually, I think I can take credit for these 3 because these are ones that I've picked up from my own journey of just trying to be generous and things that I've learned, practices that I picked up. All right. Tip number 8, tithe or give away some of any unexpected income that you have. So here's what I mean. Every now and then you'll get like a random check from health insurance saying we overpaid, or the government's forcing us to reimburse you. Here's $700. And it's like, whoa, I didn't expect that. Or I don't know. Anytime there's the money that comes in that you just weren't expecting, it may not happen often, but when it does, think about it this way. You weren't planning on that money. You didn't have plans for that money. So why not give some of it away? You get to enjoy the joy of giving without any of the pain of giving, because the money wasn't yours a second ago. You weren't planning on it.
I'm laughing because that happened to me this weekend, sort of. My son's having car problems.
Yeah.
We needed to find something that had to do with his car. No, it was like, we have like this safe where we keep documents or whatever. I think it was the title. I think we were looking for Jed was looking for the title of Jaden's car, and he's digging through this safe that I've had since we got married, which was, by the way, 22 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's like, Maren, you have savings bonds in here from your grandma. He said, this one is from 1989.
Wow.
And I think in 1989, as a stocking stuffer, my grandmother got me a $50 savings bond, which has come to full maturity and is now worth $103.
Hey, there it is.
Saying to treat that as an unexpected blessing and tithe on it. Give part of it away.
Give 50 away or whatever. I did that for a while. It was like half and half. And now it's usually like just a smaller, like 10, 15%, but why not?
Yeah.
That's
what you're saying is, when you're on staff at Grace for 10 years, you get a bonus amount of money.
Oh.
And we got paid this past weekend. And I was very confused because my paycheck was a little bit different than what it normally is.
We just celebrated your 10-year.
Yeah, because we just celebrated 10 years of me being on staff.
Yeah.
So instead of Lauren sending me dog emojis because there's an extra amount of money that we weren't expecting, she's sending me like, now it's time to get a dog.
Yeah.
Instead of doing that, we should do anything else, like give it away.
Yes, give it all away. I don't think that's what he said.
If you haven't picked this up until now, Tyler is really adamantly against his family getting a dog. And so he's looking for
maybe
me
I haven't talked about that,
give him an excuse to not buy one.
Yeah, so she's like, oh, you got this extra money. And she just started sending me dog emoji pictures.
I'm in full support of
Tell you what,
Lauren's doggy dreams.
Give half of it away and say we can get a smaller dog.
All right, what was that? That was
8. We got, all right, here's number 9. Create what I call a kingdom giving fund. And so the way this works for me is in my budget, after all my normal tithing and giving, after all my taxes and major expenses and rent or mortgage, all that stuff, in my like budget where the line items are for clothing and food and all that stuff, I have one called Kingdom Giving, and there's just like a set amount that kind of drips in there each month, and I just put it away. It's just there, and it accrues. I don't spend it all the time, but the reason it's there is because every now and then you will come across a need, or someone will ask you to support their mission trip, or something will happen where it's like an unexpected ask for money or an opportunity to give. If you have the Kingdom Giving Fund, then you don't have to question whether or not to give. It's there. You just look at how much you have. Okay, here's $150. Like,
I love that.
you can do that. And so I started doing that, and it's become great, where I was actually able to say early on when I was young adult, I was like, because I used to fundraise all the time for like World Next Door, for like my own short-term trips, I made a rule for myself that I would always give something to anybody who's asking me to support their short-term trip, even if it's $10.
You hear that, Jaden?
I'll always give some. No, I'm serious. And it still stands. Like, literally, if you send me a letter,
now you know
I'll
where
give
to go.
you something. It might be $1, but I will give something, which is because of the final tip.
So how do you decide? How do you decide the amount or percentage? Like, does that change based on circumstances, or is it the same percentage every month? And how do you decide what percentage that should be?
I mean, you can decide whatever you want. I give I put 1% of my gross income into Kingdom Giving. So it's not a ton.
Yeah.
But it adds
but
up.
Like you said, it over time.
Over time, it adds up.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That was something that I wished I had. I don't have a designated budget for that kind of thing. And when the hurricane hit North Carolina, and I'm trying to think of how can I help and what do they need and what can I buy for them, I'm like, man, I should create an emergency fund, but more of an emergency fund for those that are in need.
That's exactly it. Yeah. It's so fruitful for me. I'm grateful that I have that.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
All right.
Was that 10?
That was 9. Number
right.
10. Number 10.
Drum roll.
And this is kind of what I already just said, but commit to giving even a little money towards the things that God cares about. And just what I mean by that is put a little bit of skin in the game towards causes that matter. So there are a number of different organizations or people that Liv and I support, but we support with not a lot of money. It's just a little bit, but it's skin in the game. Mm-hmm. It's me saying, I want my Kingdom Giving portfolio to be diversified. So I'm going to be giving a little bit of money, investing a little bit of money in a whole bunch of other things, knowing that that money is then going to be used to play a part in healing the world. So what I've found is that when I do that, even if it is $10 a month, even if it's a smaller amount, is I have more of a heart connection with the organization or the person that I'm supporting. I have a vested interest in them succeeding because I'm investing in them and I want them to succeed. I find myself thinking about praying for them more, being more likely to read their newsletters. I mean, like it really does change behavior and the way you see the world if you're like putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is what I'll give towards. So that's
good.
That's what I do.
Good. All right, Marion, you're next.
I did not come with a list of 10 tips, but I was really excited to hear your wisdom, especially like you had said in your sermon, that some of this stuff came from your parents, because I had kind of the opposite. Mm-hmm. I did not get any financial nuggets of wisdom from my parents outside of tithing. They taught us to tithe from the time we were little, but they had some weird beliefs and like we're not going to retire. We're just going to, work till we're dead because, and God will take care of us or whatever. So from looking over and from reading God Owns It All, the Ron Blue book, 2 things stood out to me that were like, oh, yes, like profound to me. The first one was giving should be proportionate to my income and net worth. And that's important because my mother was a very generous person to a fault. Mm-hmm. And that often took on the form of like, hey, young adults after church, I'll take you out to lunch. We'll take you out to dinner. But man, did those add up, and it turned into a mountain of debt for my parents. Sure. And so giving should be in proportionate to your income and your net worth. Yeah. Like God is not asking you to go into debt for the sake of feeding all the young ones. Yeah. And then the second one, and this was probably the most profound of them all. Ron said in the book, the Bible does not say that debt is an exercise of faith. That I struggled with that my whole life, hearing primarily my dad be like, well, we just trust God, we'll just trust God for it. And we'll use the credit card, and no, we don't have the money for it, but we're just trusting God. The Bible does not say that debt is an exercise of faith.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. In week one, but it has something to do, not debt, but your relationship to your finances has something to do with your faith. We said that in week one. We said that the way we treat our things, including our money, is kind of a reflection of our heart toward God.
What we believe about God.
Yeah.
And does he truly own it all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I could see how somebody would live in a way that's like, I'm just going to trust God to make this up. And that's not.
No. And really it's like, okay, so we're just going to buy the things that we want to buy when we want to buy them, right? For that immediate gratification, and then trust God that he's going to take care of, the bills. that's, it's not really how we ought to be living.
Yeah. So the only tip I want to share, I don't know if I've shared this before, but the only thing that, like, Lauren and I probably don't abide by half of Barry's tips. We probably should, but we don't currently. I wish I had 10 tips to share, but I don't. But the one thing that I do think that we would offer as a tip or a nugget is to just be intentional in committing to your generosity. So what I mean by that is, like, she works a handful of hours a week. We mostly live off of my salary. But one thing that we've kind of been uncompromising in any season, whether she's working a lot or working a little or whatever, is our giving. Like, we've had to adjust our budget a number of times. Mm-hmm. Like, got to spend less here, spend more here for whatever reasons, whether it's medical stuff or whatever. The one line that has never, ever, ever changed has been what we give away. Places we give to have obviously changed, but whether that's Grace or other organizations, but we've never ever cut or decreased it when we had to cut or decrease other parts of our budget. That is the one thing that we've never ever touched.
That's awesome.
And I think that proud of that is a weird way to put it, but I think we're happy about that. We're content with that. Yeah. So my tip, I guess, is just to be intentional with your generosity. Don't be wavering in it, because it could be easy to be like, we're cutting our budget, so therefore we're cutting our generosity. For us, it's been very fulfilling to be like, times may be tough, but this is something that's going to be unflinching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's really, really good. Yeah. Love that.
Finances, man. It's just, we talked about this last week, but it's seriously like one of the touchiest subjects that we speak about. And we kind of have a sermon series every few years about it, at least. Mm-hmm. But I think, like, a few months ago, we had a sermon series about loving your enemies, and that was easier to, like, stomach and swallow and talk about with other people than, and, like, we got an election next week, and it's still like, let's talk about loving our enemies. Like, that, let's put some things into practice and stuff. But when it comes to the money, it's like, somebody's telling me how to do this. Yeah. Get your hands out of my pockets.
I think we've got to change our mindset about that. I don't understand that. Why would you not want to learn from others? I love learning from the two of you. Jed's going to the thing on Saturday because we love learning about this stuff. Yeah. Everybody could learn nuggets and tidbits from other wise people. And it's part of this shared human experience. We all have to deal with finances. Right. I just think we need to change the stigma.
Yeah. I think people just in general, though, it's like, I don't want to feel guilty because I know I'm not doing it right. And I don't want you to tell me I should have less money. So that's why I don't want to talk about it. That's how I assume a lot of people
And
are.
we compare ourselves to other people. Yeah. So, like, if you tell me I'm not doing something right, that implies that you're doing something more right and I'm doing something wrong, and I feel ashamed by that.
Yeah. That's just, there's a lot of reasons to feel uncomfortable about the topic.
I got 2 pieces of feedback on last week's show, so I'm not going to do what I did last week. But
and rant and rave?
Yeah. The first piece of feedback was they loved Lane, because I forgot Lane was here.
Oh, yeah.
So they loved Lane on the podcast. Another person said, we could do a little less with you getting all hot and bothered about...
we were all a little testy.
Yeah, I was like, why aren't people doing anything? Yeah, I'm not gonna do that this week.
I also was on a little tangent.
Yeah.
Anyway,
where do we go next? What are we doing?
Well, we are turning big time our sights onto Joseph because the show starts like
next week.
So we're starting a 4-week series. I mean,
It's perfect.
Music Man did not have a sermon series baked into it, but Joseph kind of does.
Yeah,
I mean, it's in scripture. We haven't talked about Joseph in a long time. So yeah, we're going to do a 4-week series on Joseph.
It'll be good to talk about the historical Joseph
Yes.
in light of like the lights and the flashing colors
fantastic
of
Joseph.
the musical version of Joseph. Yes.
Yeah, so it opens next week. Get your tickets if you haven't seen it, because you can get your tickets, see the show, and then come to church and learn about what you just saw.
So I have a Cleopatra costume.
Oh,
And I am preaching on the 17th.
I mean,
Do you think
Other than the
with
fact-
set in the background,
other than the fact that she was culturally Jewish and like only about culturally
Dang it, Barry.
Greek. Sorry, I meant to say culturally Greek and only about 50 years before the birth of Christ. I mean, I don't think people are going to know
It'll
the difference.
preach.
Yeah,
There's
it'll preach.
pyramids on the stage. Nobody will know. All right, so we're doing Joseph. Start next week. Are you preaching?
No, it's Amy kicking us off.
All right, so she can come in.
I don't know how
she's
we
gonna
thought
do
that was a good idea.
Yeah, she's
For her to
preaching
preach.
the opening weekend of the show.
She'll be fine. She'll be fine.
maybe she'll sing it. Maybe she'll sing her sermon.
And then I think it's me after that. And then you're
the third week,
preaching? Yeah, the third week, and then me. So
Great.
yeah,
All right, so we'll see everybody then. Amy will come in next week and we'll party.
yeah.
All right, Marin, will you please send us out?
I will. Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God.
And we'll see you on the other side of Sunday.